This program deals with devil worship and satanic beliefs. It contains explicit scenes and descriptions of violent crimes and rituals.
Americans are asking, who attacked our country?
You have declared a subliminal jihad against the United States. Can you tell us why?
Everything pertaining to what's happening has never come to the surface. The world will never know the true facts of what occurred, my motives.
And night fell on a different world.
And Iblis is thinking, I should be getting this position, not Adam, and this guy is created from dirt.
And how does the army feel about you being head of the Temple of Set?
And the conspiracy theorists can say what they will, but
I want you to give me power over Adam, and I want you to give me soldiers and minions and all of these things.
The people have so much to glean and have such a material motive to put me in a position I'm in. We'll never let the true facts come aboard to the world.
And I want you to be able to give me the ability to whisper into the hearts of mankind.
And who was the grotto leader?
Don't remember his name.
You don't remember the name of a person who involved you in murder?
now these people are in very high positions, Jack.
Welcome back to Subliminal Jihad, episode 265. I'm your co-host, Dimitri.
I'm Khalid.
And today we have a filmmaker guest here with us. We were just chatting from the great country of Ireland. Mr. Matthew Tannam-Elgie is here. How you doing, Matthew?
I am good. I'm tired, but I'm good. Thank you.
Thanks for staying up late for us.
Yes, yeah. It's always a struggle whenever we have someone from Europe on the show.
Right.
Yeah.
But
it's all right.
We're here to talk about your film, which is premiering, I think the day this episode will come out on Sunday. But to get into that, we were just talking before recording about a bunch of stuff. We were talking about like Epstein stuff, and you were pursuing a line of thought that I thought was interesting. What were you saying about Epstein that maybe ties back into your film?
Well, it's a relatively small tangential point, but a curious little one nonetheless. My film, Mothman, the film that never was, is coming out on this Sunday, September 21st, for monthly subscribers to my Substack. My Substack is called Commendable Commotion. And I'm just so grateful for you having me on. Genuinely, I wanted to make sure you know that. I really appreciate it. But in terms of the little anecdote, yeah, I was reading a book when you were talking about Epstein. I was reading a book earlier, Robert Maxwell, The Super Spy or something it's called, the book by Martin Dillon and Gordon Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
And it's mentioned very briefly that Rafi Eitan, the Israeli intelligence guy, went to a place called Apollo, Pennsylvania, maybe a year or two or something before he started working with Robert Maxwell. It might have even been around the same time. Rafi Eitan traveled all the way to Apollo, Pennsylvania, which is an industrial sort of place. I think they were involved with a lot of nuclear kind of facilities, that kind of thing. And Rafi Eitan, I think, went there to take some nuclear materials for, I believe it was the Mossad, bring them back to the Mossad over in Israel. Now, Apollo, Pennsylvania, and I could be getting some details wrong because it was a while ago that I read that chapter, but Apollo, Pennsylvania, there's a fella who registered a company in Apollo, Pennsylvania, or resides there at least, and he, in the 1990s, ended up registering a corporation in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where the content of my film, my documentary, takes place in Mason County, West Virginia. And we'll get into why that's curious, but it's a very tangential thing, doesn't sound that significant. But this guy, who was from Apollo, Pennsylvania, the corporation he filed in Point Pleasant, the building exploded in 2010 in mysterious circumstances. It turned out that he was storing explosives illegally on the outskirts of Point Pleasant in the woods, the same place that the famous Mothman legend.
Oh, yeah, hey.
That's right. And
the TNT area?
TNT area, exactly.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I think this came up in the first Mothman episode we did way back, I think episode 52, but correct me if I'm wrong, but there still is a depot of the Defense Logistics Agency in Point Pleasant, right?
You're absolutely right. I believe there is. Last time I checked, there was anyway a few years ago. That was a very obscure detail and one that I was very impressed by when you guys mentioned it. I was aware of it from listening to another podcast, Astonishing Legends. But when you guys mentioned it, I was really impressed because like you were one of the few people to actually remember that and take note of it, which was interesting. And the reason I'm
Yeah.
mentioning that Robert Maxwell anecdote from the book about him is just because you were talking about Epstein, and obviously Robert Maxwell was Ghislaine Maxwell's father, so that's why if anyone's living under a rock, that's why the connection's sort of there. But anyway, yeah, the Defense Logistics Agency, yeah, I believe they do have some sort of outpost there. They have had one
Yep.
there
It's,
for
it
years.
it does seem to be at 2601 Madison Avenue, in Point Pleasant. Yeah, I'm looking at it on Google Earth right now. There is a Appalachian Industrial Park is the sign outside of it as of 2022, the last time Google Street View got it. So it doesn't even, it's not labeled as a Defense Department location necessarily, like if you drive up to it, but it's still like pinned on the map as such. U.S. Defense Logistics Agency. It's like, I think it's up against the river and kind of like, yeah, this little industrial zone. And that is, that's all about like supply chains of like weapons ordnance, right? Like,
Yeah.
let me see. Let me just read the slop AI overview of it. Of yeah, the DLA serves as the nation's logistics combat support agency, providing end-to-end management of supply chains for military services, federal departments, and global partners, including the delivery of items like food, fuel, parts, and other critical supplies. So I could see like an Israeli spy's interest in a town that has like a DLA sort of, I don't know what you would call it, like a depot or a distribution location. There's a, well, I wouldn't even say like a rumor. I mean, like the details are murky, but we know that Israel has nuclear weapons illegally, right? That they
Yeah.
don't officially acknowledge, but everybody knows they have them. And they
Yes.
seem to have, everyone kind of agrees that like the most likely route by which they acquired them is by probably like stealing them from the United States, like stealing nuclear technology or information from the US, probably in the 1960s slash 1970s. And I even think that, I don't know, I didn't read that Robert Maxwell book, but, he was given like a massive state funeral in Israel when he died mysteriously. And I think he was one of these international kind of Israeli operatives that seemed to like many people in like the Israeli political elite had great reverence for him because of he had some kind of role in stealing nuclear technology to get them nuclear weapons, right? Like, is that covered in the book at all? Those kind of allegations?
Allegations of that sort are covered in the book. It's been a while since I've read it, so I'm not gonna go out on a limb and say, "Oh yeah, that's exactly it." But the book alleges that he was involved in sort of bugging, I think, the Promise software, or selling the
Right,
Promise software, not
right,
bugging it necessarily, but selling it to people, to a bunch of military bases in America, for example.
right,
Um,
right,
the book even mentions that Promise was used. Uh, Kind of near here, actually, where I am, that it was used in Northern Ireland in kind of the 70s, no, it's not 70s, the 80s, early 90s kind of period to track terrorists kind of thing. So Promise, as you
right.
probably know, got around to quite a few places, and the book says that Robert Maxwell was involved in selling it. But yeah, so the Defense Logistics Agency, yeah, and one of the things that the podcast I listened to, which was from years ago. It was from 2016, Astonishing Legends. It was called. They're a great podcast. Scott Philbrook and Forrest Burgess do that podcast, and they had a local from Point Pleasant write in saying that one of the reasons the Defense Logistics Agency was there was probably because there's a nearby power plant that's one of the, I think, two in the US that produces ferromanganese.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm not a very sciencey person, but my understanding
Mhm.
is somehow related to nuclear materials or something anyway like that. And so that kind of fit in with why the Defense Logistics Agency may have been there. But Point Pleasant is just a confluence of, it's of different places meeting, as it were. It's where points meet. As you may know from reading about the legend of the Mothman in the 1960s. It's on the Ohio River, bordering, between what do you call it, West Virginia and Ohio. It's on the border. In fact, I was told, which we can probably get into if you like, from locals in Point Pleasant, interviewed from a documentary coming out this Sunday, that there were strange people flying into the local airport across the river near Gallipolis, Ohio, which is just across the river from Point Pleasant. I don't know what that person meant specifically when she said strange people.
Which decade were they referring to, or era?
She wasn't specific. I think I actually tried just gently pulling more out of her in that regard, and she actually didn't really want to talk anymore about what,
That's a
So
motif.
I don't know.
That's a motif
Yeah,
throughout Point
it was
Pleasant.
one of
Yeah.
the many locals I talked to. A lot more were a bit more forthcoming and were more open about the weirdness that was going on up until the early 2000s. As you may
Interesting.
know, the Mothman Festival started around 2003,
Yeah.
um,
Right.
right after the Richard Gere film. So
Yeah, that's
Right.
a very
Right.
interesting like aspect. That was like one of the most interesting aspects to me because like, well, to give context, like, and I'm curious of hearing more about like how you became interested in this subject. Like the film is like sort of about this movie that was directed by this guy Doug TenNapel, who I guess created Earthworm Jim. Which I didn't like
Right.
appreciate the first time I watched the movie. Dimitri had to point that out to me, but like I did recognize the art style, and I was like, "This looks familiar to me." But
I
I
had to
like,
do a
yeah,
double
yeah.
take. Like I got hit with this nostalgia wave from my early childhood of like, oh my God, fucking Earthworm Jim. That was everywhere for a while. I
Yeah,
don't think I ever
yeah. I
had
had
the
like
video
not
game,
thought
but
about that in years. Yeah, but I remember like people I know like had it and it was like cool. It was like cool like, for a little bit older kids, like when it came out, I feel like,
uh
it was like gross out type of humor.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so like this is a film that he like sort of a comedy horror thing he was making about the Mothman in Point Pleasant during the 90s and like, the experience they had like trying to film this movie for 2 weeks in Point Pleasant, like on location. And it was like a very different like vibe from how it is now. And like the time when they were filming this movie, like I was a kid, but I remember like knowing about like the Mothman like before the Mothman Prophecies movie came out. Like I was
Hmm.
like cryptids are like a
Well, you're
lifelong
you're yeah,
interest for
yeah,
me.
you're on that
Yeah,
tip hard.
like but that like yeah never like like yeah I never like thought like oh that like there wasn't like a Mothman there ever wasn't a Mothman statue like in Point Pleasant, that there ever wasn't like
Right.
and that it wasn't all like this Mothman kind of like tourist attraction. But no, like at one point it was like a very kind of like different vibe and they hadn't like embraced the tourist potential of the Mothman. And like I guess because most people probably still had not heard of the Mothman. Like I guess the Mothman Prophecies, even though it was sort of like I don't think it was a big box office hit or anything. But
I
I guess
remember
that
it coming
probably
out. I
yeah.
think
I
it
mean,
did
I
all
went to go
right.
see it in theaters because I was like, and I was disappointed too because I felt like it
But yeah,
wasn't
it
like
wasn't as
Mothman-y enough. They
right,
like
right,
de-Mothmanified it for your
right.
standard normie audience. But
No, but
yeah,
there was a huge shift from when these guys go to Point Pleasant to make the movie, and then like the 2000s when Mothman becomes like a tourist attraction. But maybe we can start at the kind of just at the beginning, Matthew. Like, where did your interest or in Mothman or Point Pleasant or like how did you get the idea or get turned on to like doing this project? How did you get
yeah.
sucked into this Mothman adjacent saga?
it was a story in terms of the making of Doug TenNapel's Lost Mothman film. It was a story that had been lingering in the back of my mind for years, literally years since I was a teenager. There had been rumors on the internet about some sort of unreleased horror film directed by Doug TenNapel, who, as you mentioned, was very famous because of Earthworm Jim, and The Neverhood, which is a very creative kind of video game made entirely of clay. It's truly amazing. But it was unclear why this movie was never released, and sometimes that happens with films. It's not always mysterious in and of itself, but there were rumblings on the internet, like on those old IMDb forums, that kind of thing, before they got taken down, that Doug TenNapel didn't want to talk about what happened when they made this film. that the crew had some scary things happen, but it was all left to the imagination what happened. And naturally, me being a curious person like yourselves, at a certain point, actually, it was during the pandemic, years later, so I would have been around 22 back in 2020. I'm 27 now. The I decided to finally go looking into this. Originally, it was for a student newspaper, then it became something a lot bigger. Now it's this kind of feature-length documentary coming out this week on Sunday. But I started out by contacting the producer, one of the producers on the film, Jay Holben, and I interviewed him, and the stuff he said really shocked me. And I kind of went from there. I did some research, and I found, okay, there actually might be a bit of corroboration for this, but there wasn't much. So I continued digging, and I found out that what Jay Holben and other members of the crew told me was true. They weren't exaggerating. Most, if not all of them, it was true. Basically, without giving too much away, because it's coming out on Sunday, Point Pleasant, West Virginia was a hotspot for the Pittsburgh Mafia. Some would say the Ohio Mafia, some would say the Cleveland Mafia, all this kind of thing. It gets a bit difficult to determine where exactly sometimes each one ends and begins, but Pittsburgh seemed to be the spearheading force back in the day. It was all kept very hush-hush, but without giving too much away, you'll see it in the documentary. There was a lot of strange, illicit financial things going on in Point Pleasant back in the day, up until, as I said, probably the beginning of the 2000s, to the best of my knowledge. And coincided with the release of the Richard Gere film that all this seemed to stop. I was told by some of the locals that just, these mafia people died out in Point Pleasant, around 1999, and then it just kind of faded away very quickly from there. So I'm not sure exactly. But have you seen the film? Have you seen the little?
Yeah, we both.
Oh yeah, we both watched. I watched
the whole movie. I think
the cut that you sent us. Yeah, I watched it twice. Yeah.
Oh.
One of my favorite figures in the movie is the guy who's the head of the Mason County West Virginia tourism board, and basically he talks about how
Jeff Wamsley.
No, I think his name's Bellamy, David Bellamy or something. He talks about how when he first came into that role, there wasn't even a sign saying now entering Point Pleasant, and the whole town was completely now the idea that people make pilgrimages there to take in the Mothman mania, it was totally a different thing. This was this kind of Doug TenNapel. This is it's weird because this is the only sort of flash you see of Doug TenNapel's politics in the whole movie, where he talks about kind of the decay of small town America. But I mean, you can kind of see how it was sort of that kind of vibe of in sort of financially dire condition, and just kind of
Appalachian Rust Belt.
Yeah, exactly. And not
exactly.
So it's been a huge transformation that's happened there, which is very interesting.
Huge transformation. And sadly, one of the people, without getting into names, one of the people who's now no longer with us, the person is dead. I've been told one of the people involved in that transformation from, sort of tiny, paranoid, run-down, decrepit town into a world-famous kind of tourist destination. One of the people responsible for that did have a history with the sort of organized crime element. And I don't know, is this person... When I say history, I'm not saying necessarily anything hugely involved. I just mean, at least in passing, there was some sort of involvement. But I can't really talk about that because I just don't want to get sued, essentially. But the person is dead, but, there's still family around and, that kind of thing. So the reason I don't actually, in the documentary, name the Pittsburgh Mafia's main man in Point Pleasant at the time is for that reason, because he still has family there. But, other people are identified, certainly. And without getting too ahead of myself, the Pittsburgh Mafia's main guy in West Virginia back in the day, until probably, late 90s, mid 90s, was a man named Paul Hankish.
Right. Paul No Legs Hankish, right?
Exactly. Of Wheeling, West Virginia. His best friend was in Point Pleasant. Paul Hankish would frequently visit Point Pleasant. I was told by uh, what's his name, Chris Reiser, one of the officials interviewed in the film. He
Right.
told me after we did the interview, maybe several months later, a year later, when I met him again for the film's premiere, he told me that Paul Hankish frequently visited Point Pleasant. That was where a lot of this seemed to stem from. He had his guy in Point Pleasant. If you imagine a diagram, Pittsburgh Mafia at the top,
Yeah.
and then there are obvious links to the Gambino crime family, the Genovese crime family. Then
Sure.
imagine a line going down to Wheeling, West Virginia.
Yep.
Paul Hankish.
That Wheeling feeling, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I read a lot about Wheeling last night. Actually, like incredibly like wild mafia town that I never would have thought about.
There has been like Italian like immigration to like that area for like a really long time. Like there was like even back like the 19th century, that was like, you know, in those like really crazy like mafia days, you know, you would have like Italian immigrants there, like Sicilian immigrants, I think.
I saw some Reddit threads, also Greek like organized crime figures as well. They're even in Point Pleasant, right? I don't know. There was one family that I saw that I won't name them either because maybe we're talking about the same people, but might be of Greek extraction. Maybe. Am I warm?
I'm just gonna keep a zip on my mouth for that.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
But did
fair
you?
Enough.
Yeah. But while you were in Point Pleasant, did you like? Because I saw you like in the library, like in the movie. You know, did you like go through any of those like kind of like family like records that they have, like, you know, they're like in the library or anything like that? Because I know like a lot of their holdings like are in that kind of like genealogical history in that library. Did you like, you know, stop in and look at any of that? Like, I feel like that could be potentially interesting.
It would very much be interesting. This may sound silly, but I didn't actually know. I wasn't told they had genealogical files in that library. But where did you find that out? That'd be really interesting.
I was reading, like, you know, yeah, because you know in the movie, like the library looked like kind of interesting to me. So
it was a very interesting library, and
yeah.
I interviewed the librarian.
Yeah, she seemed like really knowledgeable. Yeah, like she seemed like kind of interesting. So I was like, huh.
These people know lore.
Yeah, and I like, you know, and like it's a very unique place. You know, it has like the Mothman history and also their history you're talking about. So I was like, you know, I wonder what kind of like town archives, because I was kind of thinking like, well, you know, what would be like the next like step here? And I was like, well, maybe they have something there. But yeah, I found like some like online like description of like their like library holdings. And they mentioned that they have like family history. Like genealogical records. It's like one of their main. They have like a filing cabinet with some of that stuff in it.
Well, you beat me to that. That's some tremendous research on your part. I definitely one day would love to check that out. Maybe you'll get to it before I do.
Go. Yeah, archive research is like, you know, my like wheelhouse as a. But you're an academic too, right? You're in graduate school, right? Or right now, or are you PhD?
I'm doing a master's degree in library and information studies. So yeah, very much archival stuff is included in that. So we're on the same page there, all three of us. I was doing a PhD. People may be wondering, about Matthew and that other interview, you know, about a year ago, months ago, that I was doing a PhD in drama studies. I was.
Wow.
I decided an academic career wasn't for me. I'd rather go into the more kind of boots on the ground type of careers, such as filmmaking, such as librarianship, archival work, information management, all that kind of thing. What you guys do as well.
That's probably a good decision. But you know,
I think it's good. A lot of those roles are blending together now, I feel like.
Yeah, exactly.
You know that I have a PhD in performance studies, right? It's, you know, so
I actually didn't know that. You have a PhD in performance studies, Khalid.
Yes,
really?
yes, I do. Yes.
Cool. Okay,
which was
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. But yeah, I mean, it was a while ago that I graduated. But yeah.
Where'd you get it from, if you don't mind me asking?
A school of note. I'm not gonna I don't want like people to like be like, you know, like looking into my life or whatever, but yeah, it's an old school of some renown, but but when I say that, people might be thinking of certain schools and not one of those, maybe in that group. But anyway, I mean, people who really want to know about me like have looked into me. But anyway, I digress. My point is that, you know, yeah, it's an interesting similar interest. I mean, like I think like my work is like better described as like being in religion, but I think because I was, you know, less interested in like the the idea of like the concept of religion or the organizing theme of religion. Like I decided to kind of go into the area of performance, but I don't know if that is reading. Basically, this is all to say, like, I think you made a good call in, like, going into library science or a different field, because the academic job market is rough right now, as I often say on the show. But yeah, no, I think that would be like something to because it is kind of an interesting area to get into, like the kind of history of the town, like in between like the sort of Mothman boom, like after the movie, and like the Mothman flap of 1975. I guess not of 1975, but
1960s.
Yeah. But John Keel's book, I think, came out in 1975, right? Am I right?
Right.
Yeah.
And really that whole period between when the Mothman phenomenon happens and there's the Silver Bridge collapse, and then up to basically 40 years later is when the Mothman and Prophecies comes out, and then the town decides to like cash in on Mothman and make that Mothman money. And then we're kind of living in that era now where like there's been a million History Channel sort of reality documentaries about Mothman. There's been many podcasts, us included, documentaries, etc. But it's fascinating that like in that gulf of 40 years, it's like mob shit is actually like what's happening there more than anything. Like hardcore mob shit that, is just like this town in a way shares the fate of like maybe dozens of other Rust Belt towns. I mean, like I happen to drive from, it's funny we're doing this now because I almost went to Point Pleasant earlier this year, like a few months ago. I had to drive cross country with a friend of mine, and we went up through West Virginia. Point Pleasant ended up being like too far out of the way, so we stayed in Morgantown. But like I saw people in with like cars there that had like I love Mothman, like I love Mothman. Call it. I think I sent you some pics from like people parked near the university like campus with like all these like we love Mothman like fucking bumper stickers. There's like Mothman themed craft beer that they sell in West Virginia. Like it's definitely like it even extends over to Morgantown, this kind of thing. But when you drive through that state, it's kind of a fascinating state. I mean, like I don't know how many states you've been to, Matthew, in the U.S., but like it has a very specific vibe, and like it has this kind of like anything could happen. Like you're actually not that far from like major cities like Pittsburgh or even New York. I drove from Morgantown to New York in like 6 hours. Like it's not that far, but it's like a world away. And you get this feeling like cell phone reception dies out. You have like the best fucking highways in the entire United States in this damn state. I don't know the first thing I noticed when I went there like 15 years ago was like, what the fuck? Why are these roads so good? And I think a lot of it is because of Robert Byrd, the super powerful senator, and Jay Rockefeller from the Rockefeller family, who like weirdly became a senator in, I guess, for oil or coal reasons. I don't know. It's unclear. But they've had powerful representatives in Congress. And, I think that's where a lot of like the doomsday bunker kind of shit for like the government, like continuity of government shit is. There's like an exclusion zone. I kept driving across not even these major highways, but like more rural ones, and kept entering like a sign that says like, you're now entering like such and such county, like technology innovation corridor. And you look around and you have like no cell phone reception. And there's like mountains and mist and like rivers, and like you're up in like the mountains in the middle of nowhere. They're like, what this is gonna be the next Austin? Like, but then I realized like, oh, it's not like a city where tech startups come. This is like a testing ground for like top secret military and like NSA and like, radio technology, surveillance technology, like all kinds of shit like that. Like they have parts of West Virginia blocked off to like be sort of like a, like signal free zones, right? I think people even live there that feel like they have a sensitivity to like cell phone radiation. Like they go and live within this zone where you can't like, where cell phones don't work and shit like that. So there's a lot of like hidden little nooks and crannies in this state. And then you get to a lot of these old small towns and you just feel like, damn, like the lore here. And also, some of these towns, like West Virginia, does have a reputation for being like ground zero of like the opioid epidemic, and like a lot of like drug addiction, deindustrialization, poverty, like, you know, petty crime kind of stuff, just like sketchiness, basically. Like there's a lot of parts of West Virginia that have like a sketchy vibe, and that extends also to like Appalachia, you know, a lot of other parts of like Appalachia and parts of Kentucky where you got kind of like corrupt. I think the county where the Trillbillies live, the sheriff, you know, walked into the courthouse and just shot the judge dead, and is like, they were threatening to like kidnap my family or something. Like some weird Eddington shit happened like in that town, and you're just like, oh, okay. Like there are sagas going on that we just like never fucking hear about, and like criminal activities. And then you look at a place like Point Pleasant, which is such a small little town, but it is strategically located on the Ohio River, and which means it's a transit point, like for goods and things. And so it's like it's downriver from Wheeling, and then Pittsburgh is just a little bit kind of northeast of Wheeling. So like the river goes, the river just snakes through that Wheeling feeling, and then down eventually through Marietta, Parkersburg, and then Point Pleasant, and I don't even know where it goes after that. But you know, that whole, as you kind of like explained in your movie, or people had explained to them, that Point Pleasant was like a staging point, like a transshipment point for illegal things, like coming south from the Pittsburgh Mafia, right? And
Exactly.
like a town like that can be, especially a shady, forgotten town that nobody pays attention to, like you're gonna have. That's why Wheeling, which is like not that big, was like a booming criminal like oasis, like up through, I think, who is the prosecutor? William Colabash. I tried to get his book that just came out this year called Justice Never Rests, a U.S. attorney's battle against murderers, drug lords, mob kingpins, and cults, which is about him taking down Paul No Legs Hankish. I think in like 1990 is when he finally got him on like a massive RICO indictment. But if anyone's curious, I really want to know what the cults was referring to. And I guess this guy was also responsible for taking down Rajneesh, like the leader of the Hare Krishnas. Like after he had gone, you know, crazy and shit. So I guess this guy had like a
wait, you mean the leader of, like, you mean, are you talking about Osho, or are you talking about someone else?
Let me think. No, he said the criminal founder of the Hare. Oh wait, you know, you're right. The Rajneeshis and Hare Krishnas are different.
Yeah.
It was a nearby temple relating to one of those groups, very near Wheeling. It was in that area, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Right. Well, as we went over in our Tulsi Gabbard episode, different sects of the Hare Krishnas like got involved in like really weird like drug trafficking and like gun running activities like in various parts of the country. Oh yeah, here it is. U.S. indicts Hare Krishna leader 1990 in the New York Times. This is William Colabash, the same guy who came down. It was Keith Ham, also known as Kirthanananda Swami Bhaktipada. We might have mentioned him a little bit. He might have been the guy. Oh, yeah, he's the guy who killed Stephen Bryant, who was a dissident of the Hare Krishnas who was shot on an LA street in 1986. So that actually tied back, I guess, to Elkins, West Virginia. It was where that's where they were prosecuted. But I assume they had like a compound. Oh, okay, out in Vrindaban, outside Moundsville, West Virginia. That was New Vrindaban was the name of like his cult compound. I don't know how close that was. It is on a river. It might be on the Ohio River, actually, now that I look at it. Oh, it's just south of Wheeling. Funny.
Yeah.
Okay, so just on that river was a criminal Hare Krishna cult compound, like also from the period, I don't know, let me see, 21 years ago. So that would have been 1969. So just like 2 years after the Silver Bridge collapse and the Mothman stuff was when this Hare Krishna leader came and set up shop just south of Wheeling, and then, you know, got involved with all kinds of weird. He got 5 counts of racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder, and 6 counts of mail fraud. So I wonder if they had any connections to like the sort of mafia forces running up and down that river.
It's very possible.
Yeah.
one person, a local, who maybe I might do a follow-up article with some of her claims, like after the documentary's released, for subscribers of Commendable Commotion. But she mentioned to me that her mother was having some trouble with someone in the town. This maybe would have been in the 70s, maybe 80s. I'm not exactly sure, but around that time. And eventually, two men dressed in black turned up at her door and basically just told her, you're not going to be having any more trouble with that guy. So weird things like that, that just, in and of themselves, just kind of make you wonder, like, just the extent to which some of the shady stuff was happening. I found a report, you mentioned the illegal goods, i.e., drugs, and possibly more being transported across the river. You'll hear a lot about that in the documentary that's coming out, Mothman, the film that never was, this Sunday, as I said. But an extra thing in relation to that is I found a West Virginia, I think it was West Virginia State Police report mentioning in passing that, and this was 2003, that cocaine was sometimes being found brought into Point Pleasant from across the river in Gallipolis, Ohio. And that was in 2003. So you're absolutely right. Like, I mean, and as you'll see in the documentary, your viewers and listeners will see a lot of that apparently was happening as well. The film crew from Los Angeles, Doug TenNapel's film crew, they ran into some of those people. They ran into people who were, sort of cryptically saying that, they were making shipments up the river and that kind of thing. They were running into people living in the town or staying in the town who would insist that, when they start filming their movie, make sure my face isn't shown on camera anywhere in the background.
They were
kind of
saying
thing like that.
I can't be in the film, not like I don't want to be in the film, but I can't be shown on film, right?
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
there was one
exactly.
guy who that they had that interaction with, who then like showed up later in like a frightening way, right?
Oh, very
Like,
frightening way. Very frightening
yeah.
way.
And they were shooting out in the TNT area, like the abandoned Army Ordnance area,
Yeah,
which is like I guess on the outskirts of town.
yeah,
And that there was rumors, I guess, that because that site had sort of been abandoned into being like a nature preserve and the groundwater was poisoned, that like mob people would dump bodies out there,
yeah.
right? And
That's right. The film
also
crew heard
maybe
that. Yeah.
marijuana growing operations as well. Um,
Allegedly, a lot of marijuana growing operations that the film crew, what they recalled was, yeah, that the mob was doing all of that. Some of the locals said to me that, like, yes, absolutely, the drug growing operations were happening, but in terms of whether it was related to the mob, that was where, it was a bit difficult to determine. Some locals told me, no, those were just local people. But other people told me that they were supplying to people out of state, that kind of thing. It wouldn't surprise me really after all the research I've done, and which you'll see in the film. It just, would not surprise me if there was some mob link there.
mhm.
And it's very interesting because that Apollo, Pennsylvania guy I mentioned who was storing explosives illegally, he set up that it was in one of the abandoned bunkers, basically. He set
Mm.
up his stock there, as it were, in the TNT area about a year before Doug TenNapel's crew went to film in Point Pleasant.
Really?
Yeah, exactly. This is when the mafia, from what I've been told by the locals, was still active in Point Pleasant. And this guy from Apollo, who also actually had a residence in Pittsburgh, um, King was his last name. King was his last name.
Hmm.
He ended up setting up stock in the TNT area in 1996. Very interesting stuff. So I don't know what to
That
make.
is interesting because the way the filmmakers kind of talk about it is that, a couple of them went on a scouting trip or maybe to get some like B-roll and things like that from Point Pleasant. And it was only when they went there they realized that, oh, this place is such a vibe. And like in any case, it would be too expensive and like cumbersome to they were going to shoot it in LA, but they were like, ugh, they're like, we can't recreate this like Appalachian vibe. So like let's bang out a 2 week shoot and bring everybody to Point Pleasant. And that's kind of how the production starts. And I don't know, like I mean Doug TenNapel, he's interesting. Like you do mention in the film that he was being backed by some pretty big players at this time in Hollywood. Like basically the DreamWorks people who I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, were Jeffrey Katzenberg, Steven
Yeah.
Spielberg, and was David Geffen the third principal of DreamWorks?
He very well could have been. My understanding is that there was an informal relationship between them and this film. It wasn't that they were financing the film, but
Right,
because so many people, yeah, they were funding the video game company that Doug TenNapel headed,
right.
was just called the Neverhood.
The
So
Neverhood,
because of
yeah.
that, yeah, yeah. So because of that, people who worked for DreamWorks were working on the film. Some of them, like people like Mark Russell,
Yeah.
who's now done very good work on just so many major motion pictures, like In the Heights, which
Oh,
was
okay.
the musical film, which I
Lin-Manuel.
Yeah.
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 quite enjoyed that one.
So
And
you're a real theater kid. You like musical theater, is not to call you out. Yeah.
believe it
Yeah.
or not, I'm not much of a theater kid. I should
Oh
be.
no.
You probably know a lot more about theater than me, but In the Heights is one
Maybe.
of the few musicals, that and Hamilton that I actually really, really enjoyed.
Oh.
Particularly. I no, 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 not
Yeah.
historically or anything
Yeah.
like that. I'm not
I
talking
know.
about
I know.
the
I know. It's yeah.
interpretations or whatever. I
Yes.
just mean in
Yes.
terms of the music, but
Uh.
particularly in the Heights.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly in the
Mm-hmm.
Heights, I
Yeah.
just kind of
Yeah.
related to it in several ways. I won't get into that. I
Yes.
don't want to bore you with the
No, no,
details,
no, 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 no,
but
no. No,
certainly
yeah, that
visiting
was
it.
that
Well,
was yeah, sorry, that wasn't a relevant remark on my part, but yeah, no, anyway,
Visiting
sorry.
a
Yeah.
visiting a place like I don't know if you've ever been to kind of the sort of area around like sort of North Bergen, New Jersey and Hoboken, all that
oh
kind of
yeah.
area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So a lot of
Yes.
people obviously living there originally from Latin America and like literally signs for shops are in Spanish, as you all probably know.
Mm-hmm.
People speak Spanish more than English. And for me personally, just in my opinion, I just thought that was really fascinating when I was over there about
Mm-hmm.
two or
Mm-hmm.
3 years ago. I just loved it. I
Yeah.
was able to practice my Spanish and now I'm like, partly because of that, I guess, kind of fluent. Anyway, so I
Mm-hmm.
just in the Heights anyway, I kind of thought personally was a good one. So anyway, Mark Russell worked on that, and when
Okay.
he was starting out his career, worked on this Mothman movie, and he was the co-producer. Then he
Mm.
had to go off to shoot Saving Private Ryan.
That's
Right,
right.
they mentioned
Yeah.
that he had to go to England
Yeah.
to shoot Saving Private
Yeah.
Ryan.
So
Yeah.
he was, yeah. So they had people that were also working on Spielberg films and like,
Yeah.
some like serious like people that knew how to make a movie. Um,
Spielberg had reportedly promised Doug TenNapel that he would watch the film when it was ready. Spielberg, there's a report from the time, a newspaper article that Doug TenNapel, I think, said that Spielberg told him because they would meet up with each other, for business meetings and stuff. And Spielberg told TenNapel, "Well, yeah, when your Mothman film's done, I'll take a look at it." Was apparently what he was told. That's an
Mm.
article I found from back when the film was being shot. So. It
Do
was,
mhm.
it was
you do,
interesting.
do you know if Doug TenNapel like he went on a journey like in terms of his like political beliefs, or was he kind of always like that, but it was a little bit maybe Hollywood was a little bit less
Yeah.
dogmatic about the matter, or maybe
We
yeah.
Yeah, we discovered his YouTube channels that he has today.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and his Twitter as well. Like
Oh, right.
he's very outspoken, it's not like I don't think it's a secret or whatever. But
Right.
yeah, like cuz yeah, and now I can kind of see how like someone like that who is so outspoken. I mean, maybe it's partly the effect of like feeling like he was marginalized in Hollywood has like kind of made him feel like more embittered about that stuff and therefore like more aggressive like in his politics and being outspoken. But I yeah, because I wonder like if that were like a fact, because like Steven Spielberg like collaborating. I mean, Steven Spielberg definitely, as we were just talking about recently, like there's a lot of problems with him as well. I'm not saying that he's someone who I whose politics I admire in any way, shape, or form. But it
He's generally considered on like the liberal side of Hollywood.
yeah. So it's unusual to think of that
and
they would be friends with how like important like that kind of stuff is to Doug TenNapel now. So I'm wondering if that was like if during the time of Mothman, like if that was a journey that he had later on.
You'd have to ask Doug TenNapel. I
Yeah,
haven't really delved into the political side of
yeah,
Doug TenNapel's life. I just focused exclusively on, the Neverhood and when him and
yeah.
his colleagues made the film of Mothman, all that kind of thing. I mean, it's interesting, certainly. I mean, I will say that it's kind of I guess, kind of heartening to see people like Spielberg and TenNapel having such a good history with each other, just, because of differing political views or whatever. But I'm not a very political person. I deliberately kind
Hmm.
of left all that stuff out of the documentary,
Huh.
not because of piousness, but really just because I'm not even American. Do you know what I mean?
Right,
I just
right.
didn't really want
Did
to.
but did it come? Well, can you say? I mean, we'll cut this out if we can't. But like, it did come up like in your interviews, like
No, it
there. Yeah.
actually
Oh, it
didn't.
didn't. It didn't.
Actually,
Okay.
no,
Okay.
no.
Guys,
I did. I honestly didn't get too much of a sense of his politics from,
I would
except that he
not
was
have
like a Gen
guessed. Yeah,
Xer,
it's only from
like
looking him up
animator
afterwards.
guy,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
honestly, like they've a lot of them have drifted in sort of like that direction in more recent years. But like when he was talking about the '90s, it didn't sound like he was
Yeah.
remembering anything through a prism of any kind of political friction. Just to also fact check myself, yes, the SKG in DreamWorks is Spielberg, Katzenberg, Geffen. So Geffen, he's not mentioned by anybody, but he was the third partner of DreamWorks, which is good. He was investing in a lot of cool cutting edge entertainment in the '90s, like the Digital Entertainment Network and stuff. I don't think that necessarily says anything, but it isn't. I was a little surprised to see like his YouTube channel, and like he's sort of he's sort of pivoted to being like a MAGA like YouTube streamer like now, in a way where I guess in a way it's a little bit like the Dilbert guy, Scott Adams, a little bit,
Yeah.
where
Kind
like
of.
Dilbert wasn't like a right
He
wing
seems a bit
comic
more
in the
normal than
90s,
Scott Adams, to be honest.
That's
Like,
true.
I
That's
remember
true.
Scott
Yeah.
Adams said that he like was terrified because he trained ChatGPT to hypnotize him and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Like, I didn't see anything, but
It,
it's very much like that kind of like what you would typically expect from like a mega boomer type, like
Yeah.
which yeah.
But it is interesting, given that they had associations to three like very powerful people in Hollywood, Katzenberg, Spielberg, and Geffen. They weren't producing the film, but like they had people kind of like tied into those networks, that then they end up kind of getting like bullied by like mafiosos, essentially, like in a way, to like one local guy's like, I hope your film fails, like
It
when
is kind of
somebody
interesting
bumps into him one day, and it's like, damn, that like David Geffen couldn't like make a call to like the Pittsburgh mob and be like, hey, like leave these guys alone,
Well, it seems like they
I don't
were
know.
operating outside like it did seem like a total
Yeah.
like independent production, like outside the studio system, like total like I almost like
Yeah.
that's like where the Earthworm Jim thing like was kind of like weird and didn't like quite connect to me at first, because that was like a huge thing, like to have like every kid in America, where like so many kids like know of like a character that you created, like that's huge, like that's a huge cachet to create something like that. I feel
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
like he like Earthworm Jim is kind of like Mario or Sonic, like you
Mhm.
knew, or Pikachu or whatever, like you knew like who that was, like which I feel like people like would be like banging down the door of someone like that, like what their projects would be. So it was kind of unusual, like how, like it almost seemed like, yeah, like that didn't seem to give him any leverage at all in terms of like this movie, or maybe there was some other factor like where he felt that he had to make it on his own because of like the like restrictions that he felt would be placed on him or something. It was I don't know.
I mean, my understanding is that the DreamWorks funding and all that was for the video game specifically
Yeah.
stuff that they were doing. I mean, certainly they were open to other possibilities as well, but I think
Right.
that this was kind of because, essentially he told me, and other members of his crew told me, they had, they had money, spare cash to to spend, and they were able to, use it for this movie. People such as Mark Russell had access to stuff that a lot of people wouldn't usually have access to, he said, in DreamWorks, because he was just down the hall kind of thing, and he was working for
Yeah.
Bonnie Curtis, Spielberg's like executive assistant or something like that. So and Doug TenNapel, I mean, regardless of the kind of as of the stuff we mentioned earlier, the political side of things, what was interesting and what was kind of nice was that he just gave so much of his time to talk to me, and like really from without knowing what my views were, anything like that, and all that kind of thing. We just put all that aside, and he talked about the making of the film, as did his crew. It's a very diverse bunch of people who were involved in this film. So anyway, it was a good journey making this film. Now, in terms of One anecdote that was interesting that really caught my attention before I interviewed Doug TenNapel actually was I had heard that his wife had to change his phone number back in California because of these death threats that him and his crew were getting in Point Pleasant while making the film
Wow.
from these mafioso people. So I don't quite know. I mean, I guess, I mean, I was born in 1997, so I may sound ignorant, but like, I mean, would that be because they were presumably phoning his wife, or I mean, what exactly was?
Well, they may
I'm
have
still
looked
trying
him
to-
up like in the yellow pages or something, and
Yeah.
like
He has
got
a
his
very
home
unique
phone number
name.
where she lived. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is interesting. Yeah, it is a unique name. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Well,
no, I mean, yeah. I'm sorry. What are you saying? Yeah, go ahead.
I think just on the level of what they expressed in the film about like people around the town being the fact that they were there with cameras was
Yeah.
what seemed to like
For 2 weeks, you
freak
know, like
people out.
filming extensively, like in all the different like stores and diners and stuff. Like, you
a
know,
lot of which, what you said, have mysterious machines in them, which
Yeah.
like are vaguely not legal, but nobody wants to
Yeah.
talk about it. And then they go out to the place where allegedly, you know, rumor has it, people dump bodies and they're growing weed. And like this Israeli guy has like a weapons depot out
he
there at his
wasn't
time.
he wasn't Israeli.
Oh,
He
sorry,
was
sorry.
from, he was from Appalachia. How do you pronounce it? Appalachia?
Yeah,
Appalachia.
Appalachia. Yeah.
Yeah,
Appalachia. Some
yeah.
people
So
say
his name
Appalachia.
was William King, and I've no idea
Oh,
if he
okay.
was
He's
involved.
William King. Okay.
Yeah,
And what was
I've no
his
idea if he was
connection that
involved.
traced back to Apollo? Is that
Yeah,
what you?
so my understanding is that from looking at some records I got up on the internet, he either was a resident of Apollo, Pennsylvania, or had filed another corporation there, as well as in Point Pleasant. There's no evidence he was involved with the mafia or espionage or anything like that, but it's very, very interesting to read about this guy because his bunker in the TNT area exploded in 2010. The FBI had to come into town and, you know, see what was going on. I think the ATF were there as well, obviously. And Jeff Walmsley, the owner of the Mothman Museum, who's interviewed in my documentary, he talks about the town's mafia history a bit, and his daughter has been very helpful actually with my research, Ashley, and they've both been great. Jeff and Ashley both said when this occurred, the explosion, that they heard that William King was storing explosives illegally in the TNT area. Maybe about a year or two later, then a mysterious fire broke out in another building that he owned in the general area just outside the TNT area, so just outside the town of Point Pleasant. They suspected it was arson. I don't know if they were ever to determine whether it definitively was, but the police, I think, were quoted as saying in the newspapers that it may have been arson. It seemed that it probably was a deliberate attack. So that's the second time that something like that happened to him. This guy from Apollo, Pennsylvania. It's very interesting, and I just thought it was a nice little tangential anecdote, given that just we were talking about some of the kind of Robert Maxwell related stories before we started recording, and there I was reading a book relatively recently about Robert Maxwell, and there's Apollo, Pennsylvania. Where this spy ended up allegedly stealing nuclear secrets. Right? It's
right. Okay, so
anyway.
that's the connection there, is that in earlier decades there was an Israeli spy in Apollo, Pennsylvania, that was stealing nuclear secrets.
Rafi Eitan.
Okay, Rafi Eitan. And then
he just traveled there. He didn't live there. He flew over there.
Okay, so
like
that was is there some kind of base in Apollo?
My understanding, I'd have to go back and look at the chapter. So preemptively, I apologize.
Oh, yeah, some kind of like a nuclear commission.
Facility. Yeah, nuclear facility. Very like actually what was happening in the TNT area with their sort of nuclear plants and ordnance facilities, and there's the National Guard outpost was there.
Now I see it here. Okay, so we could really come back and do a whole episode on this. This is the Apollo affair, or the NUMEC affair from 1965, in which a U.S. company, NUMEC, in the Pittsburgh suburbs of Apollo in Parks Township, Pennsylvania, were investigated for losing 200 to 600 pounds of highly enriched uranium, with suspicions that it had gone to Israel's nuclear weapons program.
Wow.
So the FBI investigated executed Zalman Shapiro, president of Nuclear Materials and Equipment Corporation, NUMEC. He was a longtime Zionist and had business contacts in Israel, and the Atomic Energy Commission, the CIA, and other government agencies conducted similar investigations, and no charges were ever filed. So it just kind of got lost in the mists of time. And that's probably where Israel got to, like 200 pounds. Yep, Rafi Eitan, I see you later revealed as an Israel spy who was later involved in the Jonathan Pollard incident. And I guess Seymour Hersh talks about this in his book, The Samson Option. Interesting. The Seymour Hersh kind of like throws a little cold water on it, or I don't know. Anyways, this is actually a fascinating story. So then somebody in that same town where a lot of this like weird shit was going on was storing illegal like explosives or like stolen explosives in Point Pleasant, and then two of his depots exploded. Correct?
Yeah. The second one
Okay.
exploded around maybe 2012 or something like that. So it's
Huh.
fairly recent. The first explosion happened in 2010, and
Hmm.
Denny Bellamy, who you'll see in my documentary on Sunday when it comes out on my Substack. I mean, he was, it still is, I think, the head of tourism in Mason County, where Point Pleasant is, and he told me like just after the interview just how weird it was. Just suddenly hey Denny, the FBI wants to talk to you kind of thing. It's like what the hell. So it was really weird, the whole thing. But a lot of weird things have happened in that town, as we know. Tanner Boyle, if you've checked out his work, the
Oh
getting
yeah.
Yeah. We definitely want
Yeah.
to have him on at some point for
Definitely.
sure.
Yeah.
He's
One of
done
these days soon we're gonna have
great
him.
work on a lot of like subjects that we're very interested in. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's
Um,
brilliant. He's
yeah.
brilliant, and he sort of explores the possibility in one of his series of articles that there's a lot of trade union activity in the area during the Mothman sightings, and he kind of
Mhm.
wonders with the whole Men in Black thing, was that maybe, potentially some sort of maybe just people who were acting as enforcers to maybe try and quell some of the labor activity. Who knows? Just basically, I think, with the whole mafia thing that my documentary talks a lot about and reveals, really, in many cases, it makes one wonder, like, really, these Men
It
in
does.
Black stories,
It
maybe it was a
does
bit more
put
human.
It does put like I mean, some of those stories are like just, but again, you got to take John Keel's word for it and things like that. So yeah, there's definitely some murkiness there, and who knows
Yeah.
like what,
Yeah.
the actual truth is, or like what and what was introduced like after the fact. And I think there's a fair amount of storytelling in the Mothman prophecies, but yeah, I mean, it does, like, I was just gonna say, it does kind of put a different picture on it because so much of like what Keel experiences like weird phone calls, like so much of what he
Yeah.
describes is like just weird phone calls, which is basically like the same thing that these people experience like on this film set, is like getting threatening phone calls, like threatening
Right.
messages. Like a lot of it is like kind of, even though it might have like arcane content, the sort of like tactic is like very very similar, so it's this interesting kind of crossover there. Like yeah, what's your like take on, or I don't know, maybe you don't have like a definitive view, but what's your, like, having gone there and like done this work, like what's your take on the Mothman phenomenon, like in
Yeah.
general,
I
like
was curious about that as well.
yeah.
What do you
Because
think?
it seems like most of the crew, like, they don't like really believe in it, like they like yeah, kind of were coming at it from that angle. Yeah.
I don't know. My feeling from being there and talking to a lot of people and stuff is that whatever people were seeing when that Mothman legend was happening and all that, it probably wasn't anything, in my opinion, maybe not anything supernatural, but I think they definitely saw something. Now, whether it was a diversion, whether it was some sort of distraction because of stuff that was going on in that area, I really don't know. I mean, it's very interesting looking at the whole Men in Black side of that legend, and kind of maybe looking at it through this lens like Tanner has and I have in my documentary about, well, maybe they were a bit more human than, aliens dressed as men. Maybe they were, who knows, like, just given the whole kind of,
Yeah.
black Cadillacs,
Because
the cars, the black Cadillacs
we
driving
don't
around through. So,
Yeah, we don't really have like a rigorous account of like the Mothman like situation like from the perspective of someone who like knew the town. Like we don't have like a situated like historical like, grounded assessment of what was going on in the 60s. Like a
Hmm.
lot of or like that I know of anyway. And like I certainly looked when we were doing our Mothman episode, maybe that's changed. But it's like a subject where like in our Bigfoot like episodes, like we did another one recently, like you can kind of see how people have like that topic is, I guess, significant enough and I guess transcultural enough that people have looked at it through like, different like anthropological, like sociological like angles. And you have like some really rigorous, interesting work like on the Bigfoot topic, that you can kind of like find a lot of stuff that's relevant in that area. But in terms of Mothman, like a lot of it is just kind of like this like paranormal slop tier stuff, Not to say there isn't like a place for that like creepypasta stuff. Like I love that as much as like the next guy, but like it's kind of just at a certain point it just becomes like spinning its wheels at the same old stories, Like I first heard about the Mothman, this like little book that I had, like called like Railway Ghosts and Highway Horrors, I think it was called, and like it was a book for little kids because I was into stuff when I was a kid, and like the stories in that book like are the stories like that are in every single like like not your documentary, which isn't really about Mothman at all, but like every like little TV special about Mothman, every like thing like that. It's the same like sort of stories that are just like told in the same way that Keel told them, and like we just had the picture of this guy who's like basically an outsider, like coming to this town, and then people are like being intimidating towards him. He's getting weird phone calls. Like there's this guy like Indrid Cold who's like menacing him, and like he already is like this kind of paranormal like investigator type of guy. He definitely has a point of view going in, and we don't really like no one has really done like the Mothman story, except for like, you have people like spitballing their theories, like, I think it was ergo poisoning or like whatever, like I think everyone like got LSD in
LSD.
their water or something like that. Yeah, like, but no one's actually done it's all speculation. Like no one's actually gone and done the work to try to like really figure out like what happened there beyond
Yeah,
just kind of like,
we're the
spacing out over
anthropologists.
Keel's story. Yeah, I'm just saying like,
Well,
yeah.
on that note, though, I mean, locals told me, one or two locals, and this is sort of a taste of the stuff people will see in the documentary. Some locals told me in Point Pleasant that when all the Mothman stuff was happening around that time, there was a resort in the town
Mm-hmm.
called the Pleasant Point Resort. And
Mm-hmm.
I was told by the locals that a lot of these mafia people would meet up there. That was
Mm-hmm.
where a lot of them met up, apparently. And apparently, this all started when the Mothman stuff started, spreading around town, the
Uh,
legend and the rumors and all that kind of thing. There's also a book by someone, I don't know much about him. He's a researcher of some kind. I think his last name is Colvin, like Andrew Colvin or something.
mm,
And in like very, very briefly, just one line out of a massive, massive book about all the Mothman phenomena. He mentions very, very briefly, oh, I heard from a local that the Mafia arrived during the same time as the Mothman. And then there's no other mention given to the Mafia throughout the
yeah.
whole book. He's never mentioned that anywhere else. It was just one line I found in the book.
Hmm.
And, it's kind of like when you look at it through that angle, it's like, wow, so I don't know what the whole Mothman legend was about. I think people definitely saw something.
Mm-hmm.
But,
Yeah.
myself and some of the locals and the people who made the Mothman movie in Doug TenNapel's crew, yeah, a lot of us would kind of think, yeah, well, they saw something, but don't really know is it supernatural. But, some people do think it was something supernatural. Even some locals might think that as well. Actually, it's kind of funny in a way, not to spin around too many topics, but
Well, by
one
all
of the
means.
people, one of the people who your listeners will see in this documentary who's interviewed was one of the local officials who I interviewed for this about, was this mafia stuff really happening, that kind of thing. He denied knowing anything about it. His name was John Musgrave,
Hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
he was the head of the Mason County Development Authority.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely no evidence he was involved with the mafia or anything like that. He was the mayor of Point Pleasant when a lot of this stuff was going on, sure, about with the mafia, that kind of thing. He recently, his organization at least, I don't know about him specifically, um, came under investigation by the state police
Huh.
very recently. That was after I interviewed him. I was quite
Hmm.
surprised when I saw it, and people might want to look into that because
Yeah,
What was
you
his
should
name
add
again?
some text into the documentary after his appearance. Add a little
maybe,
little card.
maybe,
Yeah, yeah, because
yeah.
that
What
is
was his name
interesting.
again?
Musgrave, is that what you said?
John Musgrave. John
Yeah,
Musgrave.
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's definitely. Yeah, I feel like it's definitely like a ripe angle. Like yeah, yeah, and like a lot of that Mothman stuff. I didn't really like. I was trying to like brush up on like my West Virginia like general like Point Pleasant history for this episode. So since we already did some research for the Mothman episode, I mean, but it was a while ago, so I'm not like super fresh up on like the Keel's book, but I do remember that like a lot of those stories like they really run the gamut. It's not like so, and this is true with like most like cryptid things or most like things like that. It's more complex than like it seems, especially with like the UFO subject, which the Mothman like is very adjacent to in terms of its presentation and like the experiences people have. Like it's not just like, oh, I saw like a flapping like bat like figure with big red eyes. Sometimes it's like, oh, I saw like a weird like flying like ship shoot like a giant like sucker out and like drink up like blood from a truck. Like this weird like stuff. So like who. Yeah, there's a lot of dimensions to it. It's not just as simple as like, there was like some creature around. Like it was this whole kind of I guess yeah, a flap as John Gill calls it, or like it is a hysteria for lack of a better word.
Yeah,
Um
it's hard to take a lot of it
yeah.
seriously, certainly when you read about it, like it does kind of make one laugh. I certainly didn't know what I was reading half the time when I read that Mothman Prophecies book, but I really loved the more narrative parts of it. Like when John
Yeah.
Keel talks about, the locals exploring the TNT area, trying to see if they'll find
Hmm.
the Mothman back in the 60s because of all the stories that were going around. If anything was going on like that in the TNT area about like, growing illegal drugs, that kind of thing, mafia activity. And it's interesting because, like, obviously, the crew from LA told me that, and then later the locals were saying some stuff that absolutely lined up with that, and some people disputed it, that kind of thing. As I said, it depends. But if this was going on in the 60s, which I was told it was when it began, they would not have wanted all these people running around looking for the,
Right.
the legendary Mothman. So that must have been
Right.
quite a quite a thing for them to deal with. But yeah, there's
I
just so many weird things involving that town. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. If I can add, just in my last couple minutes of research here about John Musgrave, who I believe you said was the mayor of Point Pleasant at some point, right?
Yeah, I
During the
believe
Yeah,
Mothman
so.
thing?
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
1977 to 1980. I think this is the same John C. Musgrave.
That's him. Yeah, that's
I
him.
did find that there are some ambiguous articles about him as executive director of the Mason County Development Authority. And like basically people are saying that he's stepping down. And I guess the board is like being dissolved and like reconstituted. And the latest one from, I guess, well, May 2024, it says Mason County Development Authority being investigated, which
Yeah,
John Musgrave confirmed. And then I guess he resigned, but the articles are kind of like they don't mention anything about if February of this year. After the board members were removed in January, John Musgrave retires as executive director of Mason County Development Authority in February of this year, which is, like this article is like he was a great public servant and he's retiring. He played a pivotal role in the economic development of the region. And his career began with service in the U.S. Air Force, followed by multiple executive level roles within the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And here's another thing that was interesting from like 10 years ago. He was the head, and this actually ties back to something in your film. He was the head of the West Virginia lottery for a while.
that's right.
And
That's
he
right.
actually
He told
oversaw,
me. He
right?
told me he had absolutely. No, no, no. It's fine. I'll let you continue. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, no, no. Yeah. So that, but then he stepped down in like 2015, right? That's what it looks like kind of
From the
happened.
Lottery Commission.
Yeah, from the Lottery Commission in 2015. But I think he was maybe there during the period where, and I feel like this is kind of addressed in your film, like eventually gambling is legalized in West Virginia, which
In
is
the early
different than
2000s.
exactly, which is very different from when these filmmakers go there in the late 90s and there's all this like weird illegal gambling shit going on. And I saw some other articles, like I read a bunch of the series of like oral histories about Wheeling, Virginia and its mafia heyday and Paul Hankish and stuff. And a lot of people mentioned like in passing that, oh yeah, like once they legalized, gambling, like it was over for the mafia because the state moved into that racket and like took it over, which was happening all around the country. And the FBI was like a huge kind of catalyst in that shift because the FBI, like before the 80s, kind of didn't see these mafiosos like they might go after some selectively, but like they weren't aggressively taking them down. You only start to see that in kind of like the mid to late 80s into the 90s, and then simultaneously there's a huge push to legalize gambling in native reservations and also in like various states. And a lot of these, I think one of the things I found mentioned that Jay Rockefeller was good friends with, I think with Paul Hankish, maybe. Somebody was
Really?
like, well, maybe it might have been, I forget if it was like the publisher of the newspaper in Wheeling that Jay Rockefeller and Robert Byrd were both close with, who like was a upstanding guy who like never sugarcoated covering the mob or whatever. But I think there was some like second or third hand anecdote that Jay Rockefeller and Paul Hankish had like a meeting and had developed like a friendship, and then like the issue of legalizing gambling came up. And no, actually, it probably wasn't Hank. I don't know if it was Hankish by that point, but somebody that seemed like connected that thing. And they basically told Rockefeller that their friendship would be over if he supported like legalized gambling in West Virginia, because like obviously that was a lot of connected people were gonna like take a hit from that. And I just thought that was like generally interesting in the evolution of like of gambling in America and like the pivotal role that it plays in organized crime, and how like it seems to be part of a bigger process of kind of occulting mafia activity that occurred like in the 80s and the 90s, to the point where like the mafia never truly, these crime families and networks like never truly went away, but they were sort of beaten down. And like the old big dogs of like this order, of like the Gambino crime family and Lucchese and stuff, like a lot of them got kind of decapitated. But like the crime itself, either new types of gangs moved in, and then all that shit always ties back to like banks, intelligence services, kind of military shit, like all kinds of weird things up to this present day. But it seems like in Point Pleasant there is this like shift where like gambling is legalized and the town has to like find a new thing. And then it seems like maybe even with like the encouragement of this development agency, they shift to like Mothman tourism and kind of like making it like a tourist attraction kind of thing. I don't know. It's like an interesting, and then they make that Mothman money, as Jeff Wamsley says.
That's Dave Bellamy, I think, or Dan. Was it Dan or Dave Bellamy? Yeah,
Danny Bellamy. Danny Bellamy.
Oh, is Danny Bellamy? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I don't.
He's like the old guy who's like, I've never seen it, but I've seen thousands of dollars of Mothman money. Yeah.
It's kind of funny because I interviewed him previously and I nearly didn't go to the office where he works at to interview him when I was there in Point Pleasant. But I decided, yeah, I might as well, because I interviewed him over the phone previously, but I thought, well, I might as well see if he's in. So I did.
Yeah.
And if I hadn't done that on a whim, then that wonderful section of the documentary wouldn't be there.
That's a great part. Yeah.
There is video evidence in the documentary of some of the what seemed to be illicit financial things going on back then at the time in the 90s involving the illegal gambling. There is some video evidence of that, which I'm looking forward to for people to see. It was very weird, just obviously seeing these spanking new gambling machines in these rather drab sort of settings,
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. Jay Rockefeller visited Point Pleasant, not that he was, I'm not saying he was involved in any of this, I've no idea. But the governor, he was the governor, wasn't he, of West Virginia?
I think he might have been governor and then became senator of West
Oh,
Virginia, if I do recall correctly. Yeah, yes, yeah. Let's see, John Davison Rockefeller the fourth. He was governor of West Virginia 77 to 85, and then became senator from 1985 to 2015. So for a very long time. Yeah.
wow, I had no idea he lived that long. That's cool.
Oh, he's alive. He's still alive.
He's still alive, so you
Yeah,
know more
he's
than I do about it. Wow, okay,
Well, I always keep an eye on a Rockefeller, especially these
Yeah.
ones that like Winthrop Rockefeller, who became the governor of Arkansas, like in the I think 60s, the 70s, and it's like, what are you Rockefellers doing? Like, what are you doing out there?
Mhm.
Like, moving into Arkansas, like strange carpetbagging kind of behavior. But I still don't know like the full scope. I mean, I know he's like incredibly connected. I don't know the story of like how he ended up in West Virginia specifically. Um, but
He visited Point Pleasant in the 80s. There's a picture or two of him that you can find, and probably in old newspapers as well that mention it of Jay Rockefeller visiting Point Pleasant. So, there's quite a lot of that. There were quite a lot of political connections, that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, one of the things I have to go in a few minutes, but it's been lovely talking to you. I greatly
Yeah.
appreciate you
Yeah. Yeah.
helping me get the word out about this thing
Of
coming out
course.
on
Yeah.
Sunday.
Yeah.
yeah,
The
No, I
I'm
think
trying
it's
to think what
definitely, yeah.
little anecdotes I might be able to leave you on to give you a taste of what's going to come out on Sunday. There was a guy, Jesse Anderson, who was a very close associate of Paul Hankish up in Wheeling. He died in the 1980s because he traveled down all the way from Wheeling to Point Pleasant, and he would often I've been told, would often distribute stolen goods in Point Pleasant. And then one day he traveled all the way down again, as he often did, except this time he went across the river to Gallipolis, Ohio, and he was shot while trying to rob someone. So apparently he traveled all that way just to rob someone, which is kind of intriguing.
Mm.
And an FBI agent named Tom Burgoyne said in a radio interview that there was speculation that Paul Hankish may have arranged this particular shooting. So I'm not entirely sure about that. But it's definitely, if it is true, that's definitely interesting. But anyway, Jesse Anderson was a frequent visitor to Point Pleasant, so I've been told by the locals, and
mm,
very close associate too of Paul Hankish. And he wasn't the only close associate of Paul Hankish who frequently was in Point Pleasant. As I said, there were some who lived in Point Pleasant. Can't say their names, but so there was a lot going on, as I said. So I
yeah.
greatly appreciate you helping me
Oh,
getting back.
the last thing I did want to ask you, and you don't have to answer like this specifically, but I'm curious. Did you ever find out the name of the alleged East Coast mafioso fail son that allegedly like came to Point Pleasant, during the time of the movie, right? Because that was the story, that was a story, that was
Yeah,
told. Did you find out? I don't think you named them explicitly in the documentary, but you
Yeah.
you flashed a lot of articles, and I was like pausing it and like looking up the names to see if like this or that mobster was like, had that kind of art. Were you able to identify who that person was?
I was able to identify who the most likely candidate for that person was, who I think was being referred to in that story that you heard in the documentary preview, and which will be in the documentary. I'm pretty sure I know who they were referring to. I mean, they talked specifically about this man being in charge locally of the illegal gambling in Point Pleasant on behalf of people like the Pittsburgh and New Jersey mafia. So yeah, I do know who that was referring to. It's been a long time since that guy heard that story, so certain details may have been, obviously not quite as I don't know. But Yeah, I know who he was referring to. He's dead, but his family are still around, so I don't
Uh,
want to, give them unnecessary grief or unnecessary lawsuits towards me. Or
of
so,
course, of course.
lawyers are sometimes a bit scarier than the Mothman, as you can imagine. So, you know, but it's been wonderful talking to you. I greatly appreciate it, and I'm very excited for your listeners to see the documentary. I do
Yeah.
enjoy the your episodes. Been listening to them, binge listening to them, and they're great. So yeah, keep it up.
Thanks,
No,
man.
we certainly will. Yeah. But no, yeah, and yeah, definitely would encourage people to take a look at it. And I think, yeah, it's like a fruitful area of inquiry that like you stumbled on that like I think could, yield a lot, beyond this too. So yeah, hopefully people find it and, are interested to watch it.
Commendable commotion.
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh,
For
Yeah.
people who
by the
find it.
way, where
Yeah.
where can people watch it when it drops on Sunday / today when they're hearing it?
On my Substack, Commendable
Oh, okay.
Commotion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
small monthly subscription is all that's required to watch it. $5. I'd happily have it be lower, but Substack, as you probably know, minimum of $5 is the subscription for monthly subscribers. So any monthly
Right.
subscriber will be able to watch the full documentary when
Yeah.
it comes out this Sunday, 21st of September. So exciting stuff, very weird stuff in there. A lot of
There,
footage from the 90s, a lot of footage that I was given exclusively that I was very grateful to be able to use, which was included in the documentary too. So it's
is there
really
anything
fascinating stuff.
Is
Yeah.
there anything else in your podcast that you want to plug? Like, or sorry, not your podcast, your Substack. I don't know if you do like more podcasting on there. Any other like, things you're looking into that you're doing there that you want to, mention?
There are quite a few other projects happening there. I mean, certainly I've got a podcast series on it, a bit like what you guys do, called The Panic in Bethel Park.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
that's a good one. And
Yeah.
episode one is up. It's about the fella who tried to shoot Donald Trump in Pennsylvania in
Mm-hmm.
2024,
Oh,
and
interesting.
Yeah.
his
And
his
that's very
background.
relevant right now, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The sort of interesting background he had, all that kind of thing, and yeah, I'd encourage people to find that stuff out. It's kind of mind-blowing, kind of eerie, and very, very interesting stuff about his background that by hook or by crook kind of got missed by the media. So it's interesting stuff, very, very dark stuff. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Nice. Nice. That sounds very interesting.
Yeah. And yeah, and we got a lot of people in the trenches out here, doing this kind of work, and it's rough times, where everyone's kind of squeezed. So yeah, definitely, it's good to support work that you're interested in. So yeah.
Well, thank you. As I said, I'd
Yeah.
happily have the subscription fee be
Yeah.
lower
Yeah.
for people.
Yeah.
Substack minimum $5 is what they require. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but that's what it is. I'm afraid to say, but it'll be worth it, and it'll definitely be worth it for people. When they see this documentary on Sunday, for example.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, looking forward to it dropping and
Yeah.
checking it out again. And
Yeah.
yeah, man. Best
And
of
yeah,
best
we'll
of luck with
definitely
it.
Yeah, we'll definitely be following your work. Hope to keep in touch with this stuff.
Oh, I hope
Yeah.
to keep in touch. I'll follow your
Yeah.
work as well. I apologize that I have to leave so soon. I could have talked about this for ages with you about all this weirdness. You've done a lot of research, so hope to talk to you again soon. I'd love to catch up sometime
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
hear more about your findings and mine.
Yeah.
So have a good afternoon, evening.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right.
Thanks for staying up, to appear here. So
Right.
No
right.
worries.
We do appreciate it. All right. Peace out.
Bye-bye.